Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of American Gods. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's focus on Wednesday's side of things in this episode. Obviously, him and Cordelia driving after the, aftermath to Demeter. It's like, yeah, I'm sorry everything didn't work out with your ex, and we hear Wednesday quiet. Something you rarely hear. He's always saying, he's always talking. So to hear him quiet, it's something because he didn't expect things to go down that way. It was heartbroken that things went down that way. But it's like to hear him kind of speechless and not talking. I don't think there's ever been a moment in the show that Wednesday's ever shut up before. And so, which I would personally never want him to shut up just because I always love the shit that comes out of his mouth. But this is, it's different. It kind of shows you how much this hits him because he already had so many regrets because of the way things went down between him and Demeter in the past, not being there for her. And it's like, I missed out on a chance of what we could have had because of my cowardice, me not being brave enough to be there for her when we had to deal with something I couldn't, punch or hit, like something I had to just sit with, but he ran away. He found the next battle to kind of distract himself from it, But all of a sudden, a flaming body comes hitting the ground. And Cordelia's like, what the hell? Where did that come from? Odin's like, get in the car. She's like, but... And so at first and this is the way they set it up, and I thought was interesting, making it seem like Johan, the berserker, went berserk, and he's been, and it's kind of insinuating like he's coming after Wednesday, going after all the people that were his followers and stuff like that. But also, it turns out, Wednesday explained to Cordelia, we didn't get to see the rundown, but then she's like, okay, I know the old man's kind of crazy, but is any of the stuff he said true? And it's like, she's like, wait, so all this stuff about gods and everything, it's like, yeah, Wednesday picked a great time to throw this at her because it's, it's always interesting throwing this at someone when Shadow got thrown into the deep end because what really made him start believing, he really didn't believe until the end of season 1, but, he got thrown into the deep end when the new gods show up, that being the technical boy, Mr. World, and Media, in that police station. That was like the real life. Did that just happen? What was that? So, kind of similar circumstances. So I thought that was fascinating. Obviously, she goes to Lakeside because she's supposed to stay there to be safe, but she's like, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to stick around. But Shadow's like, the fact of the matter is, he kind of had to go this alone, but now it's like, you have me. You can talk to me about it because I went through exactly what you're going through, which is interesting because Shadow's juggling that while also juggling the whole thing of what he should do about the Derek thing. I found it so fascinating because I think because of his own past, his own criminal history, he doesn't want to put Derek in because Shadow didn't really have anyone looking out for him when he was a kid. He kind of had to look out for himself, especially, obviously we saw last season, just because he looked different, talked differently, people treated him differently. So I think he wanted to try and give Derek the benefit of the doubt because it's like, yeah, Derek's doing this bad stuff, but at the same time, I don't know if this is necessarily connected to Allison, and he didn't know what to do because even Anne-Marie was like, oh yeah, I could tell you were pacing out front of the police station, so even you haven't told Chad about, catching Derek, because what she said was that Derek's troubled. Not that he's a bad kid, that he's troubled, that, his mom, it was his dad. His dad had passed away, and he kind of hasn't been right then. And his mom's, been working 2 jobs. So it's a thing of he doesn't really have that family unit to kind of, I guess, keep some tabs on him. So at the end of the day, I think he wanted to kind of give Derek a chance before things went too far out of he didn't want Derek to kind of be on a path that would eventually lead to him kind of losing every bit of his life. So it's kind of trying to nip it in the bud ahead of time. And I think that's so interesting because even though he's just playing the role of Mike Angel, he found a place in Lakeside and he looks at it as an opportunity. These are my friends, these are my neighbors, this is the life I want for myself. So, hey, I have an opportunity to do some good with, help thy neighbor type of situation. So he ended up informing Chad. And it turns out, because my immediate thought was okay, that he had something to do with Allison. I thought it was more of a mutual thing. She's trying to get away and he's getting clothes for her. It turns out the clothes he was stealing was for himself. It's he likes women's clothes, but in a small town like that, he's there's no way in hell I could just roll up in like buy something in a small freaking town like this. And he's like, well, look at it. Chad's already looking at me like, he's like, no, whether you want to be a boy or girl or neither or both, like that doesn't matter right now. You still broke into people's houses. You committed a crime. But for him, it's like, I was cool with Allison. I'd have no reason to go after her or hurt her. So, but Mike, well, I was about to say Mike, Shadow does say like, you know, Chad is going to like cut you down. I'm curious like what that necessarily entailed because we didn't get to see. But I think that in itself kind of coincides with what Cordelia talks about later on, where she had said the line of, because Shadow's like, whoa, you don't have to go with Wednesday because Wednesday's trying to check up on us. Oh, you're good, my boy. Let's go. But he's like, no, I'm not about to go on the road with you. It's like, he's like, you found someone. He's like, I understand, especially after the whole Demeter thing. It's like, you found someone that you can connect with, you know, with soul-wise. So he's like, I get it if that's so important to you, because he missed his chance with Demeter. He let that pass him by and now she's gone. So it's like, he doesn't want to steal that opportunity from his son. So it's like, if you have that chance, kind of go for it. Just be safe, be vigilant. And, but he's like, but if you ever need me, just call me. If you really, really need me, call me and I'll be there. It's like, it's so sweet, you know, because it's like, I feel like that's like a very true father-son moment. The first true father-son moment they've really had over the course of the series, at least I feel like. But Cordelia decides like she's down. She's like, okay, I'm ready to kind of mix up in all of this. But Shadow's like, you don't have to follow him. But for her, it's like she just found out that gods and everything are walking amongst them, that there's so much to this world and she can't turn a blind eye. It's like, now that you know, like now that you've seen that side of the world, you can never close your eyes again. She's like, and no matter how much you would want to either. So like, that's what Lakeside presented to him. And I think maybe that's also what Lakeside's supposed to be. It's meant to be a lesson for Shadow of him, you know, because after his eyes were open, he got this new identity, whether it's what whether it's Wednesday that kind of did all that with the Yggdrasil thing, or whether that was something Shadow did in himself subconsciously. You know, he wanted to kind of get away now that like all the truth was out there about what he now knows about himself and his dad and just everything that was going on at the time. He just wanted to kind of get away from all of that, leave it all behind, and now have some form of life, kind of going back to, you know, having that fresh start, like leaving behind being married to Laura, being on this wild ride with these gods and other beings and stuff. And also just kind of escaping who he was, no longer having to be Shadow Moon, get to be Mike Ainsel. So, but it's like you're just kind of running and turning a blind eye, but you can't do that forever. Your eyes are open. There's no turning back. Because even now in this life, he still dabbles. He went to help Bilquis when the time came. So it's like you can try to turn away, avert your gaze, but when it's all said and done, that world is going to find you again. There is no escaping it now that your eyes have been open. And I think, like I said, we're seeing that more and more. Like I said, I'm wondering, is that what Lakeside was supposed to be for him? Why his dad wanted him to go to Lakeside to be safe, but also maybe because he felt it was meant to serve a different purpose for Shadow, but he kind of found a different purpose, his own purpose there. And like, oh, I can start a life here. I can be someone different. I can kind of live the life I kind of wanted, you know, that I thought was kind of impossible for me, but now I can live it. But it's like, maybe at the end of the day, that life is impossible. So what's interesting though is like he's going ice skating with Marguerite, and during it, like he sees something kind of cast over Shadow, like a bird or something, and then the shadow kind of goes into the ice. And in that moment, like he falls and then he looks beneath the ice and sees like kind of a golden element. And I'm like, that's supposed to be Vishnu, right? I'm not well versed in Indian gods. I know it's Shiva, and because I think Shiva's once again, like Final Fantasy screwed me up because like once again, like when it comes to deities and like I always, because the gender's always like, because in my head, because of the game Shadow Hearts Covenant, I thought Tsukuyomi was a female moon goddess, but it's like Tsukuyomi is a moon god. Amaterasu is the sun goddess. Like just on like the Japanese side of things. And I think because I've always seen Shiva depicted as, you know, sexy ice lady because of Final Fantasy, I think that kind of skews, because I think Shiva's actually like a god with multiple arms, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's Shiva's old. I'm not, like I said, I'm not well versed in a lot of like deities all across the board, but I think, like I said, I think that's supposed to be Vishnu, the elephant. That might be me kind of pulling from a little persona, I think, because I know that's one of your personas in Persona 5 is that thing, but I don't think it goes by the name Vishnu. Like I said, I could be mistaken. I could be 100% wrong. But it was interesting because it also transformed into a coin, and then the coin slid over to... Like, the moment they were out there on the ice, I was like, this has something to do with Allison, doesn't it? Like, is her body stashed in that car or something? Is she actually below the ice? And the fact is the coin popped up from the ice and it slid over by the car. I'm like, his powers are trying to tell him something. Because remember, it's like the whole bet about, when the ice will thaw, he picked the right time. Because I think it's like everything's trying to point him there. He's not really getting it. But obviously his powers or something else is kind of pointing him in a general direction. And I think that's where we're going to find out Allison's either most likely dead, either under the ice or either specifically under the ice where that car is, or actually under the car, because they won't, because it might be a thing of you need to get to this car before the ice thaws, because if it does, this car is going to sink in and it's going to be, because I think the whole point is like, when the bet was about when the car goes under. So I don't think they fish the cars out the moment they fall in the water. Maybe they do, and you get I don't remember what the whole deal with that. I thought it was just, when it falls through the ice, bet on it. Like, the whole thing is take like clunkers or old cars and do that. So they might leave them in the bottom of the lake, or maybe they eventually fish them out. But maybe it's a thing of you got to get to that car and find out Allison's in there before it sinks into the ice, before the ice melts and it sinks into the water. That's what I'm thinking that's supposed to be, but we'll have to wait and see. I did like that moment he had with Marguerite, because obviously it's like, dinner? And he's like, yeah, but I mean, it could be you and Leon. She's like, well, Leon's got a sleepover thing, but are you okay with it just being me? And it's like, oh, that's sweet. Just because of the whole thing with Sam, too, it just makes you think, like, sadly, things aren't going to work out. Once again, the whole trying to have a normal life, it's not going to work out, because I think Shadow's going to have to walk away. Either Marguerite's going to die at the end of this, which I hope that's not the case, or he's going to have to say goodbye to her. We'll have to wait. I don't think that's going to work out, just because it's a part of that trying to live a normal life, which is interesting that this all kind of happens, because obviously 2 days ago at the time we recorded the most recent episode of Blacklist, Raymond Reddington's kind of trying to do a similar thing, so I thought the timing was kind of interesting on that front. But I did like them being kind of that jacuzzi, and she's like, it'd be nice if the snow could come in, and he does it, and she's like, I almost feel like you made that happen. He's like, bar trick. I was like, I liked it. The moment he was closing his eyes, I was like, you want to try and make it snow? And he does. It's like, yeah. I even like how they depicted to him just like breathing like a cold breath into the air like that. It was pretty dope. So them doing their thing, but also like it turned into a vision of like there was someone on horseback. Like, what's that supposed to represent? But then like he's fighting against like a snowstorm and he's on the ice, and then there's all these hands. So part of me's wondering, is there like a serial killer in Lakeview? That Lakeside. I keep doing that. That maybe like there's a whole bunch of bodies underneath the ice, because they actually make that whole point about like, Chad like says like there haven't been anything in town since like 80 something. Last episode he brought that up. So that's why I'm like, something's up. Like, once again, I keep bringing it up. I don't trust Anne-Marie. Maybe it's going to end up being Marguerite, but I think I don't trust Anne-Marie. Like, it's something about her just like being so in tune with everything in town. And I'm like, I just don't trust her. She's got her eyes everywhere. Then I'm like, I think it's going to be revealed that she's like a god or something else entirely. Or maybe she's just a serial killer. It could just be like a family thing. Like, her family killed some people secretly. They're out in the ice, and Anne-Marie just continues it. Like, maybe she, in her own way, it's maybe in her mind, it's kind of a justifiable thing of like, I'm getting rid of terrible people. Like, maybe Allison did something terrible that it's like, she needs to be punished for it. And I don't know. Or maybe like Allison broke some rule that, Anne-Marie is like, this town holds certain values and she broke it. Maybe it's like if someone doesn't fit the mold of what that town's supposed to represent, maybe that's what Anne-Marie's saying. Once again, I don't know. I just, for the past couple episodes, she's just rubbed me the wrong way. Like, I was like, just her demeanor, just like, it seems just too like she's trying too hard or something. So I don't know. we'll see whether my thoughts are right about that. But other elements to this episode is Bilquis getting a vision about where she's supposed to go potentially, and obviously some of her visions, point her toward, because obviously we have Ibis telling the story of like, obviously it's like, hey, she was supposed to be represented as like she's supposed to be a goddess of love, or is that more so what people wanted her to be? So now she's on the trails of she's now figured out who she isn't. Now she has to figure out who she is and why. Those are the big questions. And it seems like Shadow is connected that because she has a vision of like Shadow and his mom. But then there's this old lady, and she ends up tracking the lady down, kind of gets invited to this party. And the old lady's kind of like, give me back my play. Like, I know people want me dead, but it's like, I'm not dying anytime soon until I've still got more to do in life. But, Oshun shows up to be like, hey, like, it's easy to kind of like not kind of fit in when you're not invited to something to not really fit in, but like to become a part of it, you kind of have to let it become a part of you. So it's like kind of embracing everything and just kind of like becoming a part with everything and everyone around. And it turns into, a dance situation. And in that moment, she taps into everything. And the older lady kind of sees her for who she is, and they start dancing. It's a really nice moment. And she's like, I didn't see you for who you are. And she does see like someone nearby like coming out of the painting, coming for her. And she was like, back the hell up, find someone else. I'm not dead yet. So keeping the afterlife people, whether that was like a god coming to claim her soul or something else. But it's like, back the hell up. But it's like, apparently her ties to Shadow is she was the midwife, and she talked about she's the reason why Shadow was kind of taken away from his dad. It's like, yeah, I kind of broke up their family. He was so angry, but it's like I had to, because if I let them stay together, Odin would have destroyed that boy. Like, what Shadow is so special, that light inside of him that his mom's always talked about. If Odin was around, if Wednesday was around, that light would be dim. Like, I guess you can think of it as like what's inside of Wednesday and who he is, it would have darkened that light, and that light is necessary because it's like Shadow is, for him to lead the we, he needs to find his other half. And, so obviously there's like the whole light and dark shadow moon situation going. So I'm wondering, like, who's the other half? Part of me was wondering, like, is it going to end up being Cordelia? Like, maybe it's not just perchance that Cordelia, because even Wednesday had said the whole thing of, like, he rarely kind of makes mistakes. So he was wondering about the whole Cordelia thing. Even the fact that she's willing to stick around, because I was wondering, I was like, are we going to find out, like, because, like, I brought it up, like, 2 episodes ago. I was like, oh, because of was it Sister Rising or something was the episode title of episode 5? I just assumed, and because of the thumbnail, I was like, are we going to find out that, like, Shadow and Cordelia are actually siblings, and that's why Wednesday's kept her around? Either Wednesday does know, much like he knew about Shadow, or maybe that's something unrelated, but maybe she is kind of his other half. We don't know. Maybe that kind of has ties with all the visions he's been having, plus the coins. Like, there's some 2 sides to the same coin. He's one side, the other half of him is the other side. Now, what that necessarily translates and what that is, another element we'll have to wait and see. But, right. So that's kind of what Bilquis is supposed to help Shadow on that front find his other half so that he can eventually lead them. Now, what that necessarily means, the we as in all of them, I don't know whether that's supposed to be like we in the sense of his people or we in the sense of, I guess it can still apply, but the old gods, like maybe, that's what he's supposed to kind of represent the next generation, kind of leading the old god. I don't know. Kind of leading his people in the way his dad isn't able to, or rather can't, or isn't suitable for. So there's that. Obviously, they go and meet with that dude to try and... It's like, oh yeah, there's a whole thing about him eating, and then like obviously Cordelia's like, is he talking about goats? And like I was like, he was making it seem like he was talking about ghosts, but I was pretty sure he was talking about people, because the whole thing about like, yeah, what if Wednesday had solved the riddle? It's like, oh, then I would have cut out his tongue. And it was like, I had a feeling the moment like Wednesday solved the riddle and he looked so disappointed, I was like, oh, you were about to like cut him up or like feast on him or something like that. But looking for Johann, and obviously it eventually leads him to Tyr. because at first he's thinking Johan's going after everybody. It's like, because at first he was worried about like, that Johan might go after Shadow because it's like, oh, you're my son, so I don't want you in any trouble. But like Cordelia's like, I'll go with you, but it's like, no, this is something I need to handle. He's like, go ahead, take a bath, get dinner, order dinner, because he's like, once I'm done with this, I'll be fucking starving. So what was interesting though is Cordelia's like, take this phone, I can track you. And Wednesday, as he's walking away, dumps the phone, because I think there's a part of him that's probably like, no, I don't need you looking after me. You know, I can kind of take care of myself. Plus, I don't want to drag you any further in this. Like, I've got you to this point, and if things go sideways, I actually don't want you hurt. Maybe there's deeper reasons for that. Maybe after the whole Demeter thing, it's kind of made him a little more soft, and he's kind of like, I'm not, you know, you're willing to ride or die with me, but it's like, I'm not willing to let you die. We'll see. Maybe it's also because he knows that if he keeps it, Cordelia will just automatically track him and try to find him. So this way he can kind of move without her knowing. But he's going in there and I'm like, okay, is it going to be, he's going to find Tyr's body? I was like wondering whether it was going to be the flip side of things. And it turns out it is. Johan has been ripped apart. So it's like, okay. And the Tyr, at the same time, we see him showing up to Shadow's place. And it's like, hey, you know, your dad told me to get you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and then I start thinking, like, is that supposed to mean that Tyr's the one? And yep, Tyr's the one that's been behind everything. Odin's followers getting killed. And so part of me was thinking, like, okay, so why now? Like, is this him? Is he secretly working with the new gods? Or is this like a personal vendetta against Odin? Or is it both? Like, is he actually working with the new gods while also getting a personal vendetta out of the way? Because it's also like he's been burying it all this time. Like he's resented, you know. I mean, who knows when their friendship / brotherhood would turn into animosity, whether it was always there and the Demeter thing just set it off, or whether that was the beginning of it all. Because no matter what he did, he could never have Demeter, because Demeter will always have a special place in her heart for Odin, regardless of how complicated things were. You know, her hating him because, like, you know, because for her it's like hating him was a lot easier than feeling the pain. You know, she kind of ran away from the pain in her own way as well. So, I mean, they're both war gods, but because even as they were pulling out, you know, Cordelia was like, why does a dentist need this type of building? And what did Odin say? He said, because to show how successful he is, so that he doesn't see himself as the failure that he is. So it's like, so is that what this is always, this is what this is? Like, you're doing all this now because you're striking back. Like, I'm curious, like, had he already been making these moves, or is it Odin coming back into this life that kind of, did it finally just tick him off? Like, it's always been buried there and he finally just set off, like, you know what, screw it. Because the whole, I'm trying to remember, had he met with Tyr before his followers started dying? Because I don't know if meeting with Tyr is what set it off, or did it already happen? And I don't, like I said, I don't remember the order in which things kind of happened on that front. But that's interesting. It seems like it might just be petty god bullshit of like Tyr being like, no, I want to make you suffer, you know. Because it seems like that's why Johan got blamed for everything, because he was the perfect patsy for it. But I think Johan was trying to get justice because he had broken down being like, oh, his brothers, they had died. And I think he was trying to get, because when that body was on the road, he was going over to it. And you're like, if you were the killer, would you really come back in that? So I think he was trying to examine like who was responsible. And he found out he was sniffing out the fact is that it was Tyr, and try to make him pay, but ended up dying, you know. And Wednesday having to say goodbye to his flaming bear. But now Tyr also has Shadow, so kind of, I guess, using him as leverage to kind of draw Wednesday into, like, you know, kind of settling things. What that necessarily entails, we'll have to wait and see on that front. But the final angle to this episode is Laura sitting down with Mr. World on like, hey, you want Wednesday dead? We can come to an agreement. It's like, well, she's like, even if I can, like, why? It's like, because even Salim is like, you know, he talks about it later, like how he helps set up business stuff like that. So for him, he's like, he's asking the questions of like, why do you need Laura? Any of you could do it at any point in time. It's like, well, because Mr. World's like, if I kill Wednesday, or any of us kill Wednesday, we're going to set a war in motion, a war that none of us want. But if you kill Wednesday, Laura, it's going to be like, oh, that was something personal, so it won't cascade into a war. But also Laura's like, even if I could do it, why I wouldn't have the spear? And it's like, do you know how to get Odin's spear out of Sweeney's hoard? And he's like, oh, there's a way. Which I'm like, okay, like, how do you manage to do that? Maybe that's related to the tear stuff, and maybe not. But Selene, what was interesting though is like there was like an ant coming out of the screen, and I don't know whether they were going to try and like possess Laura and kind of like infect her brain with it. Because aren't there? I think there's something ant related. I want to say there's like a particular fungus that turns ants into zombies. It's some weird nature shit like that. I remember watching something about it a long time. I think it was like, I want to say it's like a particular fungus that has a tendency to like infect, like ants have a tendency to get connected to it, and it kind of brainwashes them and basically turns them into zombies. I don't remember the whole deal about it. It kind of reminded me of that, but I thought it was interesting. Selene ended up killing the ant. Like, whether he really knew what was going on or not, probably not. But he wants to talk to Laura, because Laura's quick to be like, all right, like, she doesn't care whatever deal she has to make as long as she gets what she wants. But Selene's like, I'm kind of used to handling deals like this. For him, he's like, God's words are binding. And it's like, whatever is said and done with these is like ironclad, like, contracts. And there's no getting out of them, you know. But he's like, you know, I care about you and your well-being, so let me do this dealing for you. So he lays out a lot of stuff, and even Mr. World's kind of like, all right, and just kind of, you almost see this annoyed look across his face that Salim's covering his bases of like, all right, you're going to have to protect Laura when it's all said and done to make sure that, you know, none of you come asking her for anything afterwards. Plus, you also give her 24-hour protection from any retaliation that she might suffer from, like, the old gods. But obviously Laura's like, that also extends to not only Selene but Shadow as well. It's like, okay, but that's also going to complicate things too, because I don't know if they know that Shadow's Wednesday's son. Maybe they do. They never made a point of it, so I don't know. But it's probably a thing of Mr. World probably already knows that. Well, because there was a whole thing of Mr. Town interrogating Shadow last season, because he was trying to figure out why Shadow was so important to him. So, like, it seems like none of the new gods know why. So it seems like that's still, like, a well enough kept secret of, like, who he really is. Probably, like, only the old gods are aware of who he is. And now Laura, I don't know if she ended up telling Selim or not. But it's a thing of, like, all right, with that all said and done, we have a deal. But if you don't hold up your end of the bargain, we will kill you, Laura, and your friend. And she goes along with it, which Selim's like, no, don't do it. She's like, I got this. I'm not going to screw this up. I guess because for her, it's like, now I'm kind of set on what I'm going to do. I got the second chance, and I'm going to, well, technically third chance, and I'm going to make it right. I'm going to do what's necessary, what's needed, which is interesting. I get the feeling like things aren't going to go the way that Laura wants them to. Maybe at the end of this, she does end up killing Wednesday. Maybe she ends up showing up during that whole tear situation, and she ends up being the one to kill him. So the deal goes on without a hitch, but it obviously destroys everything between her and Shadow. And maybe not. Like I said, which is sad, because like he was even like, I can't help you with getting revenge against my dad or killing him. I can't back you on that. I'm so curious how that ultimately is going to play. Cause part of me is like, I don't think it's going to, because of that extra deal part of it of like, oh, like you'll die as well as your friends, like, and her being like, I'm not going to screw this up. I'm like, I don't know, Laura, but there might be a thing of she does end up succeeding. But as she was walking away, there was a look on Mr. World's face like he wasn't too happy. Like, I think Selim interfering did kind of skew things for him, where it's like, damn it, I was kind of hoping to get things a little more my way, but shit, we'll take it how we can type of thing. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm so curious to see where this goes. We're down to the wire. There's only like a handful of episodes. I think 4. I think I remember looking at the beginning of the season on IMDb. I think there's 11 episodes this season. So a lot of stuff can still go down. I'm curious to see where this all ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.